So here you go, folks. Real debt trap. Sri Lanka owes vast majority to West, not China. So Sri Lanka went through a fairly weird. What was it? It was like a big. They took over the palace and everything. They had a little coup from the people recently, which was nice to see. They had people bathing in the swimming pool, I think, of the Sri Lankan presidential house or whatever. So this is an article from Geopolitical Economy from Ben Norton, of course, homie who's been on the show. Some people have branded him a tanky. I think he's just a good geopolitical analyst. It reads, Sri Lanka owes 81% of its external debt to U.S. and European financial institutions and Western allies, Japan and India. China owns just 10%, but Washington blames imaginary Chinese debt traps for the nation's crisis as it considers the 17th IMF structural adjustment program. So that when you got structural adjustment program from the IMF, that just means they come in and tighten your belt so tight that you can't, digest a meal. They're actually out to put you under so much austerity that poor people start dying, basically. They force on you privatization. They force on you deregulation. They make you make cuts wherever they can. And this is the 17th time that they've done that, according to this article here. Facing deep economic crisis and bankruptcy, Sri Lanka was rocked by a large protest in July, which led to the resignation of the government. The government stepped down. Very cool. Numerous Western political leaders and media outlets blamed the uprising on supposed Chinese debt traps, echoing a deceptive narrative that has been thoroughly debunked by mainstream academics. In reality, the vast majority of South Asian nations' foreign debt is owed by the West. Is that true? Wow. Sri Lanka has a history of struggling with Western debt burdens, having gone through 16 economic stabilization programs with the Washington-dominated International Monetary Fund, the IMF. These structural adjustment programs clearly have not worked, given Sri Lanka's economy has been managed by the IMF for many decades, since it has achieved its independence from the British colonialism in 1948. As of 2021, a staggering 81% of Sri Lanka's foreign debt was owned by U.S. and European financial institutions, as well as Western allies, Japan and India. This pales in comparison to the mere 10% owed to Beijing. So huge, misinformation going around. You know what I mean?
So this is like an older article talking about Sri Lanka, because this is from 2022, I believe. But it's mostly just to illustrate the principle at work here, which is that the U.S., the IMF, the West, the Western financial institutions, they are the ones that go around the world impoverishing countries, trapping them in debt, often indebting them from colonialism, like requiring payments for gaining their independence from their colonial oppressors. But of course, like in true fashion, they accuse China and Eastern countries of doing debt trap diplomacy, when again, they literally don't have the capability to force other countries into submission because they don't have the military industrial complex that the U.S. has, right? It's like you can't believe that the U.S. has 900 bases around the world and also protects the rest of the West without believing some kind of like racist vision about the third world, and that it has to like protect them from the savages of the rest of the world. It's like you have to, the only other way to interpret it in a non-racist way would be to understand that the financial institutions, the dollar being used as the currency in trade for all these other countries, is because they have military bases stationed there, not because they're voluntarily doing that. To think anything else is just a latent white supremacist vision of current events and geopolitical relations. But I'm trying to find a news article here. Again, it's tough to find it in Western media, but Zelensky in the past couple of days has been talking about this very same thing, how they're running out of troops. They would like to negotiate for peace. Like Ukraine actually would like to, I think Zelensky himself has been saying it, but the West is telling them no. And Ukraine is even saying, like, we have very little time. Like the video clip I saw, he was saying, we have very little time. We're encountering a lot of casualties and deaths and just wounded people. And we need to negotiate for peace. But the West doesn't want them to do that because they can't capitulate to Russia in any way. They have to have this market of Ukraine and all the vast resources opened up to Western financialization, or else this is not a win for the West.
Yeah. It's amazing that this is how primitive it actually is when you get down to on the grandest stage of the organizations of people through government and stuff, that this is really the most mature that we can get to, is by having absolutely no diplomacy and saying, no, we don't talk to our enemies over there. We don't deal with them. It's embarrassing. And even our enemies, they're all talking with each other. And it's not going to end well if we keep trying to play our cards close to our chest. It really doesn't make too much sense. So I'm a little confused about it. I think a lot of other people who study and have really fine eye for geopolitics know that this is all aimless kind of, capitulating. So according to official statistics from Sri Lanka's Department of External Resources, as of the end of April 2021, the plurality of its foreign debt is owned by Western vulture funds and banks, which have nearly half at 47%. The top holders of the Sri Lankan government debt in the form of international sovereign bonds are the following firms: BlackRock, ding, 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 Ashmore Group, Alliance, Germany, UBS, Switzerland, HSBC in Britain, JP Morgan Chase, U.S., and Prudential. The Asian Development Bank and World Bank, which are thoroughly dominated by the United States, own 13% and 9% of Sri Lanka's foreign debt, respectively. Washington's hegemony over the World Bank is well known, and the U.S. government is the only World Bank group shareholder with veto power. Less known is the Asian Development Bank is too large vehicle for U.S. soft power. A neoconservative D.C.-based think tank and the Center for Strategic International Studies, which is funded by Western governments, affectionately describe the ADB as a strategic asset for the United States. So, again, this just goes into more detail about what we do, the techniques that we use, and it's what people would like to call either post-colonialism or, Neocolonialism, sure. It's colonialism. It's just doing it with a pen instead of a sword. It's the same thing.
Sometimes still doing it with weapons, but, I mean, that's literally what the Gaza genocide is about. Like, Israel's trying to colonize Palestine completely, and then the rest of the Middle East, if they're able to. It's no secret that they have wider plans. Like, there was the recent picture of the IDF soldier with the patch on his arm, and it was like the Greater Israel graphic, and it showed like all of Syria, Lebanon, and whatever other countries that they have, desire for. That's like what they're openly saying they want to do, and it's always a battle for resources, and they will use weapons of war. It's not even just being done with financial instruments anymore. They will just hide it. That's like what the TikTok ban is all about. That's what all the accusations of anti-Semitism are all about. It's I forgot that you talked with Vijay Prashad about the IMF in Ukraine too. A lot of this is probably relevant to that as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's like IMF season or something, because it's just on everybody's mind. Everybody's starting to put the pieces together and see who's really running the show, or who's really responsible for the conflicts that pop up. So when Palestine and Israel broke out, a lot of people that didn't know about it, didn't understand the conflict, became aware, decided to do a quick Google search and say, it's a little suspicious because USA, I don't like USA. And so anybody who's backing friends with the USA, I'm going to scrutinize heavily. And so this thing broke out, and people started looking closer. That's where we got the hate mail the other day from somebody who was like, I used to be liberal, and then I saw what was happening in Palestine, and now I'm like radical communist. It's like, okay, it's because of this shocking thing. People go and look at the background of the conflict, and they're starting to find out, like in the case of Ukraine, huge amounts of money owed but to the IMF. So the IMF is everywhere. If there's a problem in the world, if there's people starving, if there's rebels arming children and getting them high on weird drugs so that they can go out and slice people's heads off and cannibalize them, you can bet the IMF might be behind that. We have no idea. Seems to be a pattern. So, don't get me started. So the media also blame China for Sri Lankan debt default, which, again, was totally The evidence did not point to this. While 81% of Sri Lanka's foreign debt is owned by Western financial institutions, Japan and India, major corporate media outlets, sought to blame China for the country's bankruptcy and subsequent protests. The Wall Street Journal pointed the finger at Beijing in a deeply misleading article titled, "China's lending comes under fire as Sri Lankan debt crisis deepens." The newspaper noted that the crisis opens a window for India to push back against Chinese influence in the Indian Ocean region. So, guess who owns the Wall Street Journal? Rupert Murdoch, the one and only, of course. Who else?
You know that.
Yeah. He owns Market Watch. He owns National Geographic. He owns The Sun, I think, and I think a bunch of tabloids and Sky News he owns. He's got his feet in everything. Yeah. And he's just like William Randolph Hearst. He's just out to score political points and use it as a tool, not as actual journalism.
I was furiously looking for that, for the link for that video, or like even an article, like a transcript of Zelensky saying that, because basically the message I was getting was that he's even losing faith in the West's ability to support Ukraine, and is starting to feel like a pawn of the West, which is like what the critics of the proxy war were always saying was going to be the case, is that this was a proxy war between the US and Russia. This wasn't just some invasion sparked out of nowhere because Putin is a madman and just woke up and felt like invading Ukraine one day. Like, there were actual substantive and material reasons for this happening, and negotiating for peace would have been the better option sooner than later. And it was an option a month into this war, 6 months into, it's been an option the entire time, but the West didn't want the terms that would have been conducive to what Putin would have been okay with, and it's because the U.S. wants to aggress on Russia. They want to take more territory. They want more territory and resources in Ukraine. That's what they wanted to do, is privatize this stuff. And if they can't do that and push NATO even further than what Russia is comfortable with because it feels it's an existential threat, then they can't negotiate for peace. And it's unfortunate because it will end up being until the last Ukrainian, the way that they said early on. And it's just not going to be in the way that they were hoping.
Yeah, and you're dead right. It's the privatization and everything. This is this amazing Trojan horse where if you can't pay your debts back, then we're going to send in our companies, and you're going to have to give up plots of your land or real estate or whatever, and or we're going to get our mining equipment in there, and we're going to extract that value out for you, and then we're going to pay you a hefty fee on top of it and give you a terrible percentage of your own natural resources. This is the capitalist mentality, which says, I have the capital, even though the workers are the ones that create the value. We're going to just go ahead and take the surplus value off of the workers. This doesn't have to be like this. That's an old entrenched kind of idea that I think people are going to also wake up to, the same way they're waking up to all these injustices and seeing that Western powers are behind them. And you have these young people out there saying, imperialism, down with imperialism. This is good. This is a good development, saying that finally, I guess, we've got some hope at having a revolution. But at the same time, Jesus Christ, technology is a double-sided sword, because you have all these people who have the access to all these, there's so much information out there that is good and solid and historical and useful and academic information from our leading Ivy Leagues, and there's so much good stuff. But what do? We watch people drop Mentos into Coke all day on fucking TikTok.
I mean, that's intentional, don't you know? Because the Chinese algorithm is much more centered toward education and literally vocational training. And I don't know if this is true because I'm only hearing this from, it's like literally the Western narrative is that they claim that in China they have TikTok, or their version, which is Weibo, and the algorithms are tailored to actually educate kids, put them into meaningful hobbies, develop them as people, whereas they purposely tailored the algorithm to beat brain rot for the West. And sounds conspiratorial to me. Doesn't sound like it's very that has a lot of merit to it. I would say even if that is the case, it would be a function of just Western mentality for entertainment as opposed to substance, because that's just how our media is. It's we make entertainment. We don't make even when we have documentaries, like they're not really that informative. It's always like surface level stuff, and it's a lot of flash in the pan, like flashy graphics and stuff. But it's not the people aren't watching Ken Burns stuff here, and even that is just like PBS.
I love me some Ken Burns, but Ken Burns will also put you to sleep. I understand that, but we really have to have? You remember how the transition of the History Channel started, or the Learning Channel? These cable channels that used to be good. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's the principle of capitalism. They needed to seek profit, so they sought lower and lower common denominator audiences, and they turned into trash.
Yeah. I think that's the ultimate downfall of everything, is when we pander to the lowest common denominator instead of hold them up. Now, the thing was, Rupert Murdoch saw that most English papers did that, placated to, he saw that they were actually trying to uplift people with actual news and stuff. And he was like, you know what? I'm going to just give the people what they want. And so he created an entire media empire on salacious stuff. But there was some quote somebody said, because he runs The Sun, the famous tabloid magazine, and a lot of politicians got really disillusioned with trying to get people to vote for them. Like the Labour Party was trying to get people to say, look, if you care about workers' rights, come on. But during the Thatcher days, the people were like, what's the point in trying to help these people? All they're going to do is... they're not going to vote for you, and they're just going to go off and read The Sun. And this is true. This is why I think we need regulations against certain types of manipulative media like this. There's no journalistic standards. I swear to God, I saw an article the other day that was, I probably said this before, that chewing gum can make you smarter, right?
Oh, yeah.
Chewing gum can make you smarter. I looked down, it's Wrigley's. It was the Wrigley Institute did the study. There's all these types of... coffee. Coffee is really, really good for you. I look and I see who did the study. The Italian Coffee Association or something like this.
Madonna.
Why is science interlinked with the profit motive? It's going to kill us. It's stupid. Anyway.
Bringing it all the way back around to Murdoch, though, I agree. I mean, it literally is a function of having so little truth in media. And it's just funny to me, again, how people will complain that, like, China is authoritarian or any other communist country is authoritarian because they limit the media. It's like, no, they limit the fascism in media. They limit propaganda. So you don't have a bunch of capitalists corrupting your media and telling you that you need to chew gum to be smarter. It's like, and like tell you to ignore the poison in all your food. It's like, that's the future we're trying to avoid. And that's what socialism actually allows you to do with your community councils, your democratic control over institutions, actual ability to regulate companies in a meaningful way that hurts their profits, and prevents them from engaging in shitty business practices that you don't want them to do. Like, you can't complain about the authoritarianism of other countries and then also look at your own media and see that you're being lied to constantly and think that there's no solution and just throw your hands up. It's like, there is another way. You're being propagandized against it, though.
Yeah, absolutely.